Welcome to Concrete Conversations, the Indian real estate podcast. I'm Yash.
And I'm Akshay, and we're the hosts of the show.
Whether you're just starting your career or looking to switch career paths, the business of real estate broking might be an interesting opportunity for you to explore.
Over the last few years, this profession has become more regulated and even embraced technology, creating a more professional and secure environment for both buyers and brokers.
To talk about how you can explore this career path, we have with us today the head of sales at Ashiana Estate Consultants, Karan Bhatija. An engineer by education, Karan explored opportunities in the tech and startup space before finally finding his calling as a real estate broker.
Today, Karan specializes in buying, selling, and renting luxury properties across several Mumbai micro markets and caters to a global clientele.
Before we get started, be sure to listen till the end of the episode to figure out how you could gain access to free professional resources that will help you get started or upscale your business as a real estate broker. Hey Karan, how are you? How's it going?
Hey Yash, I'm doing good.
So I thought we could start the conversation by asking you how you got into the business of real estate brokerage, because I get a lot of questions and I get a lot of interest expressed in this business, in this profession, because people are able to enter real estate through this is something that I've seen. So what was your journey like?
So my father started Ashiana Estate Consultants in 2005, and in 2015, when I was looking for jobs, he had asked me to lend a hand in the office promoting a couple of properties that were a bit far and outside of Bandra Khar to try something new. So while helping him with sales and marketing strategies for this, he would also send me out to deal and interact with a couple of clients. And one of the first interactions that I went for, I ended up selling them an apartment.
Wow.
Nice.
And this was in Dombivli. So initially, I would only handle the smaller ticket size projects. It was like learning with training wheels for me almost. So I would only handle these two areas. One was Dombivli, which is a little ways away from Thane, and then Virar, which is the end of the Western Line.
And so when did you sort of decide that this will be something that you would like to continue doing full time?
So this became a full-time thing for me when I first saw the Lodha World Towers at Lower Parel, and I was tasked with doing sales and promotion on behalf of our organization for that property.
Nice.
So at that time, the project was on an invite-only basis. So we were reaching out only to HNIs and ultra HNIs to invite them for an exclusive preview. Lodha had designed about a 4,500 to 5,000 square feet show villa, and they had someone who was from the Armani team who had designed the villa at that point in time to walk customers through it.
Right.
So going through that, interacting with HNIs and ultra HNIs, I realized that there was a big gap in terms of what clients expected from realtors and what was being offered by the realtors at that point in time.
Okay.
Clients expected a certain level of professionalism. They expected a certain level of knowledge and basic mathematics to help them, determine per square foot numbers and things, which is fairly easy for a lot of people, but still was lacking in our industry for some reason. So based on these interactions, I realized that I could essentially curate a real estate brokerage into a slightly higher end, like a polished service, and provide clients with an end-to-end experience, all the way from, placing a phone call to them to come look at a property, all the way to giving them the keys for said property, and maybe even renting it out in the future or helping them sell an asset to, fund the payment for this asset that they were purchasing.
Right.
You started with smaller ticket size residential and then you worked your way up to slightly more luxury residential. Have you also started branching out into other asset classes like commercial warehousing, also all that sort of stuff?
So we do commercial properties only strictly on a reference basis. If I get the client through a known reference and the client is comfortable with giving me a written mandate over the property, I'm happy to market it and showcase the property. However, I do make it clear to clients that residential real estate is my forte. Another thing that we have expanded into is the fractional ownership space, where we've partnered up with a company by the name of Strata. And
Nice.
we promote their assets from time to time, and we've had great success and very positive feedback from our investors for these properties.
Is being a realtor or a broker for any special purpose vehicle that engages in fractional ownership different from being a broker for either resale or for under construction projects?
It's a very different approach to real estate,
Hmm.
because this is entirely a numbers game.
Hmm.
Whereas with residential real estate, we generally see some sort of emotional attachment or some sort of emotions attached to the purchase decision.
Okay.
Here, it's purely a numbers decision. We share spreadsheets with the client. Most of none of our clients so far have viewed any of the properties where they have invested with fractional ownership. Whereas
Right.
with residential property, that's the first starting step, is you show someone the apartment that they would like to, rent or purchase.
Right. Karan, do you think that the business of real estate broking, like Riyash originally asked, is a good way for people to enter real estate and even learn about real estate as a sector?
And the reason I have seen a lot of people ask me this question is, maybe they're interested in real estate investments, or, they're interested in possibly developing a plot of land that their family has, some ancestral property, something like that. So, from that perspective, do you think that maybe becoming a broker for a younger person is a good segue into this industry, or is that a different set of knowledge?
I would say becoming a broker is a good segue for that. However, I would argue it's better for them to train and learn under an established broker who's well established locally, or one of these international channel partners like JLL, CBRE, Knight Frank, etc.
Okay.
Because the kind of training program, etc., that they provide is far better than going in and trying to learn by yourself. And I've had that experience, and I've mainly learned by looking at how salespeople interact with clients, how they speak, and picking up bits and pieces from people that I've observed over the years.
That makes sense. Karan, you sold projects in Dombivli, and now you even have listed yourselves with projects like Lodha World Towers, which is in Lower Parel. How does it work when you are figuring out or navigating consumer demand in specific micro markets?
So the important thing is to pick maybe one or two micro markets. I don't recommend doing more than two because it becomes very tedious, and staying focused only on those. So outside of Bandra Khar, Santa Cruz, which is our core market, and then South Bombay, which is our secondary micro market, we generally don't take on other assignments
Understood.
because it becomes difficult, and there I'm not able to provide clients with the kind of knowledge and the kind of information that I'm used to giving my customers on a daily basis. Like with either of the two micro markets, any project you name, I can tell you when the last transaction has happened, at what price it's happened, and what terms and conditions generally the houses have been sold at. So I like having that kind of knowledge available to me. And if I don't have that knowledge, I feel like I'm not able to do the best that I can, and I would rather just stay away at that point.
Right.
Is there any tips for people who are getting into this in terms of how they can identify which micro markets they should look at?
So generally, it's always a good idea to begin with the neighborhood, that if it's possible to begin with the neighborhood where you're currently staying or where you've grown up, because the only way to get to know a micro market is to spend a lot of time there.
Right.
So with Bandra Khar, Santa Cruz, I spent a lot of time just walking the streets. I have friends who stay in and around the area, so I spent a lot of time traveling around the area. I know the lanes. I know the areas where people prefer. I know how the micro market is divided into different communities as well. Like for example, there's a whole Salset development in Bandra. So any client who has a similar background would maybe prefer that over say Khar or Santa Cruz, for example.
Right.
Whereas there's a high number of Jain Derasars and Gujarati temples towards Santa Cruz side. So generally, Gujarati buyers prefer Santa Cruz to Bandra or Khar.
Got it.
So this knowledge only comes from being in an area for a certain amount of time, or accelerating your knowledge by walking around the area a lot and trying and interacting with local stores and other places.
I think I can attest to this because there's so many conversations I've had with people in real estate where someone mentions just the name of a building,
Uh-huh.
that, oh, this transaction happened in this building, and somehow everyone just knows where that building is. There's no additional information given. It's just a given in the conversation that you move on with it. But that's a really interesting way to put it, that like it's familiarity, and the things is how you can get a good grip on the information and the market. So with that in mind, now we've spoken a little bit about the modalities of the work involved,
Uh-huh.
right, of being a broker. But for someone young out there who's looking at this as a potential business for themselves, how does one actually go about becoming a broker in today's times?
So there are essentially two types of there's two types of real estate markets. One is the primary market, where you deal with developers and only sell developers inventory.
Okay.
This is an easier place to start out because you don't have to interact with other people, with other realtors. You generally only interact with the client and the developer sales team. This is easier for a couple of reasons, because you can always rely on a developer sales team to be professional, to be on time, and to provide accurate information,
Right.
which is a bit of a problem sometimes with our business. So it's always easier to start working with a developer, because you know that everything that they're saying to your customer is factually accurate
Right.
and can be verified using RERA. That comes to the second bit, which is in the primary market, you need a real estate regulatory authority or a RERA license to operate. This also adds a certain amount of credibility to you as a young person starting out. The fact that you've put in about 10,000 rupees, if you'd like to do it in your individual name in the state of Maharashtra, or 1 lakh rupees plus applicable taxes for the state of Maharashtra in a company name. And it always adds a level of professionalism to your visiting card as well, if you mention your RERA number and your RERA ID. The second type of market is the secondary market, which focuses on resale properties and or rental properties.
Right.
These are a bit more difficult because it involves managing clients on both sides of the transaction, sometimes the buyer and the seller, or the landlord and the tenant.
Right.
And also following up with them to make sure your payments are done on time, the documentation is done properly, and it's not a very organized space, so it becomes a bit difficult. When working with a developer, you have their entire legal team and their entire sales team to help you address your customers' queries, which make it a little bit easier as a starting point. And that's where I started. And I honestly think I couldn't have had a better start than working with a developer sales team, or working hand in hand with a developer sales team to promote a property.
Over here, for the people starting out and who are interested in pursuing what you're saying, does it make sense for them to choose whether they want to specialize in residential or commercial at the onset of becoming a real estate broker, or they should explore both and figure out their niche?
It makes it easier to pick one and go with it. And even when it comes to the bifurcation between primary and secondary, it makes sense to pick one and go with it. And I always argue in favor of doing the primary market, because the documentation, the paperwork is easier as a starting realtor doing a registration for the first time, doing the basic client KYC for the first time. All of those processes are easier because the developers person will take the lead, and you just have to see what they're doing, how they're doing, so you can keep it in mind going forward.
Right.
You talked about the secondary market being slightly less organized than the primary market for various reasons. One is, has RERA helped sort of make this market a little more organized? And two is, I mean, could you shed some light on the various arrangements? Like you said, sometimes you have to represent both the buyer and the seller, or you have to represent the lessee and the lessor in the secondary market. So could you shed light on some of the different types of agreements that end up being formed, or arrangements being formed in the secondary market?
Sure. So the basic sale document is always just a sale deed or an agreement to sell an apartment. However, the paperwork for the buyer becomes a bit complicated, because if the building has been redeveloped, instead of an agreement to sale, what the developer would have given the person who's got the redeveloped house is a permanent alternate accommodation agreement,
Okay.
which is something that's very rarely seen. And if someone is new, they may not be able entirely be able to understand what the document entails,
Right.
because it talks about the development of the previous building, the indexes related to the previous building, and then the owner's apartment, the society, the terms agreed with the society. And it also makes several references to the development agreement, which is generally the agreement signed between the society
Hmm.
and the said developer.
Right.
Whereas the permanent alternate accommodation agreement is executed between the developer and any individual from the society. So
Okay.
that's one kind of complication that you see.
Hmm.
Another issue sometimes is that the apartment belonged to someone's parents or grandparents, and then the next generation that's trying to sell the house. There are three or four of them, but only say one of them is present in the city. And then there's a whole set of documents that you have to get from all the other family members involved to make sure that they are aware of the sale, b that the numbers etc have been represented properly to them, and see that over and above the agreed sums they have no further claim to the apartment.
Right.
So getting all these documents together, getting them in order, and getting the right documents becomes a little bit tedious with the resale market.
Hmm.
And generally, while buyers will have lawyers, sellers may not necessarily appoint a lawyer to do their side of the legal work, because it mainly involves handing over documents.
Got it.
Right.
So if you are a seller's representative, it's always important to make sure that you know what documents are there for the house, so that if there's any buyer or their legal representative who approaches you, you know what documents can be shared from your end.
Got it.
Karan, right now we just spoke about sale, right?
Yeah.
So you must be dealing with rental agreements a lot also, right?
Uh-huh.
Or leave and license.
Yeah. So Tejas, can you just take us through that rental and leave-in license?
So the legal term for rental is leave and license, because rental then goes into the complications of the Maharashtra Rent Control Act and tenancy and subtenancy and all of those.
Right.
So with leave and license, it's actually a fairly simple thing. In fact, the government has made it very easy
Right.
by creating an online agreement, which is a simple template that covers the basic clauses like your lock-in period, your license fee, also known as rent, the security deposit, the tenure for how long you'll be using the apartment and the premises for.
Hmm.
And this registration only requires an Aadhaar card, PAN card, and your biometric fingerprint.
Hmm.
And it's also available in the convenience of your house using a registration agent as opposed to going into an office.
Right.
So
Hmm.
with leave and license, it is a bit easier than sale.
Right.
But that being said, with leave and license, most landlords who have several properties also have a standard leave and license agreement that is made by them and their lawyers. And sometimes prospective licensees may not be acceptable to all the clauses that are presented within that agreement. And then it becomes your job to kind of find and strike a balance between the two sides and make sure that they go forward with the agreement.
Right.
Got it.
So with so much of this industry moving to and using technology and using online services,
Uh-huh.
how has the business of brokerage changed and property marketing changed in the last year? Has that moved online as well?
Yeah. So after RERA, a lot of it has moved online, because now we have guidelines that are set out by RERA that make it easier for everyone to market certain properties. Whereas before, anyone could make certain claims about a said project, say like, I will deliver the project in 2 months or 3 months. Now there's an actual authority and a regulatory body that is overseeing these claims and verifying the legitimacy of them,
Yeah.
which makes the information presented more honest and more transparent. The second part of it is with the rise of social media, Instagram, and predominantly YouTube, a lot of people are looking at apartment walkthroughs and other digital ways of interacting with a house before actually coming down, because a lot of the buyers that we do get are not always from Bombay. We get inquiries from other Indian cities and international cities as well. And being online, having a good web presence, having content posted regularly makes it much easier for these buyers to then trust you and trust your organization, helping them with a large transaction.
Right.
Right.
The other thing is that on the smaller ticket size spectrum of things, it's become much easier because with these, there are now a couple of online portals where you can interact with a developer sales team on a Zoom call or a Google Meet or any other sort of virtual meeting.
Hmm.
And then using a Razorpay or another payment link, actually pay the token amount for your house online as well.
Interesting.
A realtor that I had recently interacted with. He's based out of Bombay, but now he only sells real estate in Kolkata and other smaller Indian cities where he's never visited.
Wow. Okay.
He interacts with the clients virtually, he interacts with the developers virtually, and he makes sure that the client's funds are also transferred online during the course of the virtual meeting.
Nice.
And speaking of, like you said, new age and new way of doing things, I think one of the things that has become increasingly more valuable, especially to people who are entering the job space now, is mobility. And that could be mobility in terms of being able to relocate themselves, or it could be mobility in terms of work schedule as well. Do you feel that real estate broking is not only a good way for you to be able to set your own sort of schedule when it comes to your job, but also a good way for you to earn even a secondary stream of income if you want to augment another full-time job that you're doing?
So, personally, I think real estate brokerage is 100% a full time job,
Hmm.
especially for the city of Mumbai, because here the transaction sizes are very large
Hmm.
for the island city and for both the micro markets that I deal in. And that requires a certain level of trust and transparency with the client, which can only be built up by spending time with them
Hmm.
and spending a lot of time researching, gaining more knowledge and understanding more projects, the kind of transactions that are going on, and then maybe getting a little more in depth, also understanding home loan services, the kind of loans and other financial services available to your customers to help them purchase the house.
Right.
See, at the end of the day, what I am selling isn't a house. It's a service of helping you find a home and helping your family find their needs and requirements within a physical space.
Right.
Right.
So only when you spend time with people and understand the kind of requirements that they have related to the space, to say other intangibles like the security in the area, the traffic, that's only when you're truly able to connect with a client and help them actually find the house that they're looking for.
Right. And that it's interesting that you say that, because real estate is also something that for a lot of people is a once in a lifetime purchase, especially with residential, which is the sector you work in. It's a very personal decision, like you said, and it's also a very big life decision. So I guess that added level of thought and responsibility does come into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe this is asking you to reveal a little bit of your trade secrets, but if you could be kind enough to share with us, how do you personally go about structuring, your research into any micro market that you're transacting in, and how do you go about validating, what is the right and wrong information, and sifting through to find the right information?
So there's two types of information. Generally, when I go look at a project, what I generally do either the same day or within the same week is look at the RERA page for it and read through the title report, look at their IODs, look at their CCs. And these are all documents I've learned to understand on my own over time.
Haven't we all?
When I first looked at them, I had no head or tail of anything. In fact, at that time, I would call Yash and show it to him and be like, "Can you explain this to me, please? Because my client has a query and I don't have an answer." So initially, I would carry my doubts either to a developer who I was on good terms with or to another realtor that we know really well, and I would get answers for my questions from somewhere or the other, and understand the meaning of all these documents. Additionally, what I also do is I look at the last few transactions for that project. If it's an existing project, if it's not something brand new. If it's something brand new, I try and look at a few projects or a few buildings in and around that area on online portals where you can see registered transactions and try and build up a price expectation for that project.
Right.
So, for example, if a developer is quoting X per square foot, but the local micro market is X minus say 4,000 or X minus 5,000, then I would ask the developer that this micro market, there's a 5,000 rupees discrepancy between your pricing and the pricing that's going on. So is there some premium value that you're adding, or is this price something that you're flexible to work on in case I do get a customer that's closer to market price than your expectation? And I try and understand where their mindset is and whether we can make a match.
Right.
Speaking of resources, also, Karan, Yash mentioned that you are keen to and you are willing to share a few of your own personal resources that you have crafted with any listeners who are keen to learn more about or pursue a career in broking. So could you shed a little light on the resources that you will be sharing with them? And
Sure. So what I will be sharing are mainly two types of documents. One is mandate letters and the other one are fee letters. Sometimes these two overlap, but I prefer keeping them separate.
okay.
So mandate letters for buyers, I go up to a prospective client and I tell them, hey, for the first 60 days or 90 days or 30 days, depending on what we mutually agree upon, I would like that you see properties only through me so that I can provide you with the best service that I can, and have that safety in the back of my head that you aren't going to go purchase an apartment through somebody else after taking all the knowledge from me.
Okay.
The second one is a fee letter, which essentially details the brokerage charges that I provide for different transactions. So for this, I'll be sharing 4 types with you. For lease, I'll be sharing one that you can share for landlords, one for prospective licensees or prospective tenants, and one for buyers and one for sellers. And these letters also cover the services that I provide, the fees I charge, and when these fees will be payable to me, so that it's all transparent on the first day itself.
Nice.
Got it.
So if you had to give 2 pieces of advice to someone who is just starting out as a broker today, what would you tell them?
I would say start by getting a RERA number.
Right.
And reading up on the projects in and around your area. And the second one would be is deal in the primary market, go to as many sites as possible, interact with as many salespeople as possible before even picking up the phone to try and sell anything to anyone.
Right.
Make sure that your knowledge is sound and that you have that basic foundation. So tomorrow if a customer hits you with any question, you aren't caught off guard.
Perfect.
And in case you are, the right answer is always, I will check and get back to you instead of providing someone with any wrong information.
Right. Okay, I think with that, Karan, thank you so much for your time and thank you so much for joining us on Concrete Conversations.
Thank you. I think this was a good conversation, Karan.
Thanks for having me, guys. This was a great conversation.
To access the free professional resources that we spoke about earlier in this conversation, have a look at the description of this episode on YouTube.
And if you're listening to us on Spotify or any other audio streaming platform, head over to our Instagram account at the Indian Real Estate Podcast, where you can find these resources through the link in our bio.
If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to follow Concrete Conversations on Instagram to know more about upcoming episodes and for some behind-the-scenes content.
For more deep dives into the world of Indian real estate, stay tuned for more Concrete Conversations.